Hey Joel, thank you for the information. I finally learned how to navigate through Alex and the other information I was asking for. I was having a hard time.
Christiane, was that directed to me? I just popped in.
Yes, it was directed to you.
Oh, well, hi.
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to thank you for helping me out with navigating through Alex and all the stuff I was asking for. You helped me out a lot.
I'm grateful that I could help. I'll tell you what, I am still struggling with the entire Moodle platform and Alex and the whole bit, and eventually it'll fall into place. But right now, it's a still a bit of a challenge for me as well.
Yeah, I think after the second or the third week, we'll get it.
I do feel a little slow on the uptake, as they say.
Man, me too. Me too. I'm not used to all this new technology stuff. Give me the old stuff.
Me neither. Me neither. I do miss books and classrooms and teachers and kids next to me, but it's a new world.
Same, same. I'm a hands-on type of person, so my brain gets fried when I'm in a computer too long.
Oh yeah, I've
Mm,
I feel you for sure.
yes. But here we are. We'll be in class soon.
I will do it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your patience. How's everyone doing today?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Doing
Glad to
well,
hear.
thank you.
Perfect. Hopefully you all had a good weekend. All right. So before we dive into week 2 content, I want to kind of check in with everyone to see how everyone was feeling about week 1. What came up for you there? Any questions about it? Anything sticking for you? Where are we at with it for week 1?
I was thrown by the history side of things. I got really confused by who did what, when, and why.
The who, what, where, when, why. Yeah. So, yes, those are the kinds of things that it does take a level of memorization, right? Like it's not something that's intuitive. It's something you kind of have to memorize. I do suggest making flashcards for some of these when you're getting into things like the functionalism and structuralism and those types of things. They do tend to show up on the exam. So I would be familiar with some of those names, but there's a lot. I know there's a lot of names in chapter 1. So the major concepts, structuralism, functionalism, gestalt psychology, those things I would definitely make some flashcards for. You didn't get the best scores this week. Yeah. Hang in there. That week is it's a little heavy in terms of names and all of that. That one, it's not really about, to me, it doesn't feel as much about understanding the concepts as much as it is just remembering all of it. So if you want to make, some people will make flashcards if flashcards work for you. Other people might make a chart. You might want to make like a table, a chart that kind of lays everything out in simplistic way so that it can help you with memorizing. But whatever way you usually study and what works for you, I would definitely do that with that first chapter. Okay. Well, hang in there. So this week, we're diving into week 2. We're going to be talking about the neuroscience, and we'll get to that in a minute here. I wanted to remind everyone, if you are watching the recording, you're not here for the live session, you have to go back and do the discussion forum, right? But you have to make sure that you post at least 2 posts in the discussion forum in order to get full credit. So make sure that you do that. And then also make sure that you've completed the week 1 knowledge check and exercise. Now remember, for those you have 2 attempts. I do suggest taking those 2 attempts for the knowledge checks and the exercises, even if you get a decent grade the first time. Do them again. It's great practice. And it's going to take your highest score. So I do suggest using both of those attempts for both the knowledge checks and the exercises. And then the quiz, remember, is 1 attempt. So don't do that until you've done the knowledge checks and the exercises. All right, and then for the breakout rooms, as we talked about last week, we'll be doing the breakout rooms. Make sure that you're able to unmute and discuss the concepts with your group. And if you're not able to participate, make sure that you kind of sit back and do the discussion forum later. Oh, so people are having some difficulties with time management. It is a lot of content for sure. Yeah. I would say the biggest thing with all of these courses is to not procrastinate, right? If you can avoid procrastinating and maybe do a little bit at a time, maybe create a schedule for yourself that works for you. But don't procrastinate. That's when people tend to find themselves getting into trouble. So try to avoid that.
May I speak to me here?
Sure, go ahead.
A couple things I really struggled with. Yes, time management. It's a lot of content.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, this is not my only class. I have 4 others, as I'm sure most of the students do. Um, when I'm what tell me if I'm wrong in this. I'm reading like the PowerPoint to start. Opening curriculum for me for each course has been to go through the PowerPoint and then start going through the chapters, leaving maybe clicking on the knowledge check, leaving that open, and as I go through. But when it comes to flashcards, all of this is new to me, and I feel like I'm just rewriting the chapter. And
Yeah,
I know that that's too much and it's a waste of my time.
absolutely.
So if you have any tips there, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So for one, I would just kind of going back to the PowerPoint that you mentioned, keep in mind the PowerPoint might not contain everything in it that you would need for the exams, quizzes, knowledge checks, exercises. So what I would suggest doing is, and yes, there's a ton of content. So we talked about last week, right? There's a ton of content in this course. So what I would suggest doing is creating flashcards, not rewriting the entire textbook, because that's just, you already have that. But I would go with the text. I'd go into the text. You'll see that there are certain things that are bolded. There are certain terms. At the end of the chapter, there's some, like summary types of questions there. I would suggest going through the textbook and creating flashcards for the definitions, shortened and in your own words. I say in your own words rather than the textbook's words, because if you have to put it in your own words, it's a little bit more challenging than just copying what the textbook says. So it does take a little bit more time. However, it helps you to remember what it is. Right. So then you're actually grasping the concept as you're working through the flashcards over just copying what it says. Also, short and sweet, not a long, full definition. It's too many words. Just like in your own words, what does this mean? Right. It's short and sweet, simple as you can make it to try to make try to make it more digestible. Right. I don't want you all recopying the text.
Personal paraphrasing helps with cognition,
Yes.
I'm sure. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I thought the PowerPoint, I was kind of using it as like an index, like, hey, maybe these are the key points to focus on. But I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Yeah, I would I also like to do anything that you can kind of make it into maybe a silly way to remember it. If you can come up with some people will come up with songs or rhymes or word associations. Anything that can help you remember whatever works for you to help you remember can be really great for this. So yeah, but flashcards tend to work well for people, tables, but digestible, right? Don't make, I've seen people create tables or flashcards where you're writing out paragraphs. That's not going to be helpful. You just read the textbook for that. Make it digestible, make it small amounts, and it's in your own words, so it's helpful to remember. Okay, so give those things a try, and then we'll check in next week and see how you're all doing. Okay, so this week we're diving into the nervous system. So we're going to look at the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. We're going to review how the nervous system impacts us daily, short-term and long-term, and an understanding of how the brain utilizes stored information. Has anyone heard of the term unconscious bias? Or implicit bias, it's also known as.
Yep.
Perfect. So this is one of those things, as I said last week, there will be some things that I will want you to walk away with from the course, remembering forever, right? And this is one of them. Unconscious bias, this is the definition: underlying attitudes and stereotypes that people unconsciously attribute to another person or group of people that affect how they understand and engage with a person or a group. So unconscious biases, it's what's stored in our brain that we sometimes can make quick judgments about people and situations, even when we don't know we're doing it. And it all connects back to our nervous system. So I'm going to share these short clips with you all, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit.
We humans have to make countless decisions during a typical day. Even now, while you're watching this video, you're probably trying to figure out what kind of person I am, or whether you should stop watching me or continue, besides many other possible issues. Our consciousness is quite limited in terms of resources to pay full attention on each and every decision that we make. So our brains generally use shortcuts to make decisions and continue with the next available problem. This is obviously a time and energy saving approach, but there's a little catch. Most of such unconscious decisions are wrong, especially if the problems at hand is about something quite complex, like another human being. In our everyday life, we encounter countless occasions that we should draw a conclusion about the appearance, thinking patterns, or behavior of other people around us. Since they're very complex beings like ourselves, We cannot gain all the necessary information about them, and naturally, we use quite obvious clues to draw a conclusion. And most of the time, our thinking and decision circuits in our brains try to cover up our lack of knowledge about others by mental shortcuts or prejudices. There are a large number of pits that our minds may frequently fall when making decisions about others. For example, if we find a person beautiful, we tend to think about him or her more positively. Conversely, if they have an obvious negativity in their appearance or behavior, we tend to expand this impression to the whole character of that person. As primates, we generally prefer people who look like us or talk like us, and our brains always look for stereotypical information instead of unique personal features. All these judgments are processed by our unconscious mind, and we generally do not aware of these processes. As a result, we do not analyze in general. We look for familiar cues, and when we detect them, we reach an immediate conclusion. Well, obviously, this is not good. In natural settings, such snap judgments might save our lives. But in today's complex social interactions, these kind of old habits may create serious problems. And it's certain that we should avoid such decision biases. First way to overcome such problems is to develop a personal awareness about this issue. Monitor yourself all the time about your mental shortcuts, prejudices, and misconceptions. Question yourself as frequently as possible about your cultural stereotypes or biases. Second, you should slow down your own decision process. You must give yourself more time to know the other person more profoundly. Third, reconsider all the decisions you make about other people. Do it as much as you can. And finally, be aware and monitor the ill effects of such biases around you as much as you can. And finally, I want to suggest an unconventional way of minimizing the effects of our own conscious bias. Read literature, especially novels and stories about the adverse effects of prejudice, biased decisions, and stereotypes. When you spend some time to read and contemplate on such matters, your conscious mind will be most likely to catch you when you're about to give a biased decision based on wrong internal assumptions. Emotional stories, on the other hand, will educate your unconscious mind and eventually minimize the effects of your personal or cultural biases. This sure will take some time, but it's going to be worth it. Have a nice reading.
What does the neuroscience say about bias? There are two things in particular that happen with bias and the brain. The first thing that happens is that we gravitate to sameness or to likeness. It's called likeness bias or homophily bias, which is to say that when we meet someone, our brain unconsciously in under a second will say to ourselves, is this person like me or not like me? The us, the them, the in-group, the out-group. We do this in under a second, and in fact, in under 120 milliseconds, our brains will categorize the person tied back to race, age, and gender. And we say, is this person like me or not like me? If the person is like me, the brain says, go ahead, be nice, be empathetic, faster than if the person is not like me. If the person is not like me, the unconscious brain says, proceed with caution, proceed with care, proceed with apprehension. And the reason why we do this is because at the end of the day, as humans, we're animals. We have the reptilian brain right here. The reptilian brain's purpose is to keep us safe from harmful stimuli in the environment. If you're like me, the brain says, less likely to harm me. If you're not like me, the brain says, well, could eat me, so I should be careful. So that's the first thing the brain does. The second thing the brain does is it categorizes people based on data that we intake through our senses from the environment, and then we treat people based on these categorizations. So, for example, let's pretend you're talking to a brown woman. Your unconscious brain will clock, I'm talking to a brown woman. It will go to the filing cabinet in the brain that says brown woman on it. It will open up the filing cabinet. Whatever message or meaning you are holding in your filing cabinet, in that moment, moment about brown woman will come up, and it's on that basis that we then treat the person. Which is why it's so important for us to be paying attention to what message or meaning are we absorbing in our interaction with the woman, what we're absorbing from the media and society at large, what other people tell us. Because what we hold in our filing cabinets, tied back to people's cultural identities, often is incorrect and is riddled with bias, and it's on that basis that we're treating people.
All right. So you hear her referring to our brains as filing cabinets, right? And if that's really how we're going to frame it as we talk about it throughout the rest of the course, is you can imagine we've got these filing cabinets in our heads, and every bit of information gets stored and categorized based off of our own life experiences, things we come across. It's all stored. And as we approach our world, we approach different situations, scenarios, people, we're basing it, and we're basing our behaviors and thoughts off of what's in our filing cabinets, right? So things will continue to shift, be added, replaced, changed throughout our lifespan. So let's look at some of the pieces that we have within our nervous system. We've got our neurons, and you will want to know these different parts in terms of the test, the quizzes, and the midterm. So the neurons are the nerve cells, the basic elements of the nervous system. We've got the dendrites, the fibers that receive the electrical messages, impulses from other neurons. Axon are the long extension that carries the messages to other neurons, and then the myelin sheath, a protective coating of fat and protein that wraps around the axon like links of sausage. There's a great image in your text. Here it is. This one's a great image to kind of show you what that looks like with receiving the messages and being able to have it travel through the neuron and passed on to the next one. And then we have a synapse or a synaptic cleft, and that is the space between two neurons where the axon of the sending neuron communicates with the dendrites of the receiving neuron with chemical messages. So one neuron is passing on a message to the next neuron who's receiving that message through that fluid-filled space. Let's just skip this. So here's another example that you'll see this in your textbook. So this is that space, that synapse in between one to the next neuron. Now you'll see here on the dendrite, we've got these receptor sites. Right? We also have these fluid-filled vesicles on the neuron that's sending the message. These chemicals share all sorts of different types of information and pass that information from one neuron to the next, where the other one picks it up with these receptor sites. Now, a lot of our medications and things of that nature are impacted in this area. So for some medications, they might make it so that it's easier for these receptor sites to pick up that the chemical, which we call a neurotransmitter. So it makes it easier, or it makes it more accessible, or it blocks the receptor site so that it's not picked up, right? Just all depends on what the purpose of the medication is, but a lot of it's impacting these receptor sites right there on the dendrite. Now, there's a bunch of different neurotransmitters. You won't need to know all of them for this course. There's actually a really nice chart in your textbook. It's a green little table that lays out what the specific neurotransmitters are, their major function. I do suggest studying that chart because a lot of the content that you'll see in the quizzes or midterms are directly what you see in that chart. So it lays it out in a really nice, simple way rather than just like reading it in paragraph form. So here are some of the major ones: acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins. And I'm going to share this little video with you all that kind of talks about it. And I'll give you a warning. The video is a little bit cheesy, but it's pretty straightforward and to the point. I'll also share this video with you in the announcements. I know for some people it's easier to watch videos than it is to read it. So I'm going to share this and then we'll chat.
What are neurotransmitters? Well, neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that transmit signals from a nerve cell. These signals can be passed from one nerve cell to another, from a nerve cell to a muscle cell, or to a glial cell. Neurotransmitters are used by the brain to help regulate breathing, digestion, and even heartbeat. They can also affect other things such as concentration, sleep, and mood. So how do neurotransmitters work? When a nerve cell fires a nerve impulse, neurotransmitters are packaged inside of synaptic vesicles. These synaptic vesicles fuse with the cell membrane and release the neurotransmitters, which cross a fluid-filled gap called the synaptic cleft. These neurotransmitters land on receptor sites of another nerve cell and pass on the nerve impulse. This happens very quickly. More than 100 neurotransmitters have been identified, and some important neurotransmitters include acetylcholine, which is key in activating muscles, norepinephrine increases heart rate and blood pressure, dopamine deals with pleasure and rewards, GABA suppresses some types of anxiety, and serotonin, which promotes the sense of well-being and happiness. And that be the basics on neurotransmitters.
Okay. So let's get into some of the way that the nervous system works, some of its major responsibilities. So if we take our nervous system, it's divided out into a couple of different key parts. We want to divide it out first, central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, right? These are the two major pieces. Now, in terms of the exams and the quizzes, a lot of times people confuse central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So the way that I personally remember them is central is like center. So if you think of center of your body, brain, spinal cord, that's the central nervous system. Everything else is in the peripheral. All right. So if you can remember that, then you're pretty good there. So central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, all the other stuff. Now, the peripheral nervous system is going to further divide out into the somatic division and autonomic division. Somatic is voluntary movement and communication with sense organs. Autonomic is the involuntary functions of the body that keep you alive. I remember these and separate them out. With autonomic sounds like automatic. The things that happen automatically in your body, your heart beating, your lungs breathing, we don't have to remember that for it to continue to happen. Right? Those things are going to keep happening because they're part of our autonomic division, where somatic is going to be our voluntary movement. Okay. Autonomic then divides out further into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Has anyone ever heard of the fight or flight response? We hear fight or flight? Yeah. So super common one that people hear about. Fight or flight is when we get scared or something is maybe emotional or something just kind of is triggering to us, we can go into a fight or flight response, which means our bodies are being impacted physiologically to respond to whatever is happening, whatever the stimuli is. So we might get ready to fight. We might get ready to run away, right? There's also some other parts of this. So it's fight, flight. There's also freeze, where we might not be able to do anything and we just kind of freeze and stand there. Or fawn, we might go into like people pleasing mode where we're just trying to like smooth it over and get things fixed as quickly as possible without actually taking it in or processing it. So we do a lot of interesting things when our body is, when our sympathetic nervous system has been activated. So fight or flight is what I'm wanting you to really remember with this. Parasympathetic is also known as rest and digest. So sympathetic, fight or flight, parasympathetic, rest and digest. That means we're getting back to our baseline, our homeostasis, as it's called. We're not in such a heightened state. Our body can get back to rest. Our body can get back to digesting food because we're not digesting food when our sympathetic nervous system is activated. Okay, I'm going to give you kind of a silly example of this. Let's say you're walking through the woods, you're hiking. All right, it's a beautiful day, the weather's great, the birds are chirping, it's very relaxing. And along your hike comes a bear, and the bear comes out and attacks you. Full on attacks you, right? You weren't prepared for that. You know, this might be something that you have no concept of. Probably don't get into fights with bears all the time. So this is something that's going to likely trigger your sympathetic nervous system, right? Your fight or flight response is going to be triggered. You might try to fight the bear. You might look around on the ground for a weapon, try to find a stick or a rock, right? That might be your option. You might try to run away and get out of there as quickly as you can. Right. So I want you to take a minute and think about this. Imagine you're in that very relaxed state, and now you're suddenly in the fight or flight response. What is your body experiencing physiologically? You could type in the chat or shout it out. What is your body going through? Increased heart rate, yes. Shaking, scared, anxiety, sweating, endorphin, stress, scared, sweating, anxiety. Be frozen, that's an option, right? You might just be standing there. Adrenaline, yes, lots of adrenaline. Shock, fear. Exactly, yes, rush of adrenaline. Our bodies move very quickly into this, right? As soon as that bear is attacking, our body is ready for action. That adrenaline's going to rush. Our blood also rushes to our extremities to make us like stronger, faster, moves away from our core. We're going to probably be feeling anxious. Our heart rate is going to likely be really fast. Our breathing might also change, right? Our breathing might also change. We tend to start to breathe more shallow and faster, right? And sometimes we hold our breath. We can do that too. We might hold our breath, or we can breathing really, really fast, right? So all of these things are physiological responses to the stress, right? Very fast. If you've ever been in a situation like this where something happens and you're suddenly startled, you're suddenly scared, your body's in this heightened state, ready to do something. And it makes sense. It's ready to protect us and keep us alive. So it makes sense. Now, let's say whatever you did, whatever option you had worked, and the bear runs off into the woods. You don't see it anymore, right? You don't see the bear anymore. Stand up, you brush yourself off. Do you think at that point you're back to being relaxed in the way that you were before the bear attack? Probably not, right? Probably not. You're probably not going to be in that same relaxed state. It's going to take some time. Mind you, you don't know where that bear just went. He might have went to go get his bear friends, or he's going to go do something, rest, and come back and attack you again. Who knows, right? We don't know what happened, why the bear ran away. So what a lot of people are going to be doing is still looking around for that bear. Still in a heightened state, but not as heightened as it was when you had to fight the bear off, right? Or try to get out of that situation. So it's brought down a little bit. You're starting to relax, but you're not completely relaxed. You're waiting for the next situation to happen. You're more prepared, right? You might be looking around and trying to get yourself ready in case something else happens, but you're still in that heightened space. That heightened space where you're not quite in danger, but you're not quite feeling safe, that's anxiety. Isn't that crazy to think about, right? Like that's anxiety. That's what anxiety is. It is our body in a heightened state, ready for danger, even when there's not necessarily danger there, or there could possibly be some pending danger, but we don't know, right? We don't know for sure. So it's just kind of in that heightened state. If we look at situations where people experience trauma, especially multiple instances of trauma, right? Things like domestic violence, child abuse, anything that's kind of repeated, right? Bullying, anything that's kind of repeated, these people are living in a heightened state, right? Their sympathetic nervous system is regularly activated to where that starts to become their baseline, right? That starts to become their baseline, and that starts to have an impact on the rest of their bodily systems, right? That leads to high cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone, and it's going to impact every other system. So when we say that stress and mental health does have to do with our bodies physiologically, this is a great example of how that happens. Because it would be really hard to function and think if our bodies are always waiting and prepared to fight off danger, right? And sometimes there is perceived danger, which means we think that there could be something that could happen. And sometimes there's actually really danger or a threat there. Either way, the body responds the same way. The body's not good at recognizing different types of stress or stress levels. It just knows when we're feeling stressed, this is how it responds. So before we get to that, one of the things I want to go back to with parasympathetic, you all mentioned that we, when the bear's gone or whatever the threat is no longer there, we're still not fully in that relaxed state. There are some things that we can do to help support our parasympathetic nervous systems, right? We can do some things if we're recognizing that we're feeling stressed, by like doing things that allow for us to relax and sort of let our body also connect to the fact that maybe the danger is no longer there. So for example, let's say you're driving down the freeway and somebody suddenly cuts you off, right? Which happens all the time, I'm sure. Somebody suddenly cuts you off. What a lot of people do is gasp and go, right? And you kind of have that response, that gasping. A lot of times people will just hold their breath. They're just sitting there in that space, holding their breath until the danger has passed. The holding your breath, the gasping, it tells your body there's danger, and it holds on to that stress and anxiety. You're now sympathetic, and your body's ready to respond, right? Ready to try to figure out a way to get yourself safe. So we do that a lot. When we're feeling stressed and anxious, a lot of times we don't even realize our breathing has changed. The key here is that our sympathetic and our parasympathetic, those parts of our nervous system, are not voluntary. These are under the autonomic division. This means we don't have full control over it. It's something that happens automatically, right? Just like our heart beating and our lungs breathing on their own, like that just happens by itself. Now, there are things we can do to help support it, right? If we sit and we do some deep breathing and we try to do some relaxation strategies, we can slow our heart rate down. We can slow our breathing down and breathe more deeply, right? There are things we can do, but we have to recognize that without doing those things intentionally, our body's going to respond from the autonomic division. It's going to respond in a way that it feels is the best approach for us. Any thoughts or questions on that? So we're going to move into our discussion for today. So we're going to go out into our smaller groups. For each group, you're going to pick one person to be the reporter who's going to come back and kind of share some of the thoughts that the group came up with. But I want you to think about a time where you experienced a fight or flight response, something you're comfortable sharing with the class. But when you experienced a fight or flight response, and I want you to use the words sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, right? So when was the time you experienced a fight or flight response? And what was your recovery like with the parasympathetic nervous system? So make note of the question. Once you go into the breakout rooms, you won't see the question anymore. So make note of the question. I'm going to open up some groups. Okay, and when you're ready, you can go ahead and join the groups. For those of you watching the recording, this will be your discussion forum prompt, and I'm going to pause the recording. We're going to give it a few more seconds to let everyone join. All right, welcome back, everyone. So which group would like to start and let us know what your group discussed?
I'll volunteer first
Go for it.
because it's fresh in my mind. We discussed one of our group's individual encounters during a hike, running into a snake, or pretty much finding it beneath your feet, and the sympathetic response taking over. And it was not a fight situation, it was a flight situation that lasts, a few seconds till you find yourself in a more comfortable situation. And then I guess the parasympathetic response starts to, I guess, overtake the sympathetic and rationalize what's happening until you can find out you're okay, and your adrenaline starts to go down, your heart rate starts to go down, things like that. Is that a correct kind of way to be thinking about what our
Exactly.
discussion was?
Yep, you're right.
Okay. And don't play with snakes.
Don't play with snakes. Yeah, I have come across a rattlesnake while hiking. Definitely a flight situation.
Welcome to California.
Yeah. All right, who'd like to go next?
Next. So for our group, we had two of our members who actually had a similar experience with drowning. And we found, I guess our fight took place, which wasn't the best option for us. And after, after we were okay, there was the nervousness, there was just a whole lot of energy on my part, because I was one of them. There was a lot of crying, it was a lot of freaking out. And then we had another one of our group members who his, I guess, fight response manifested in protecting someone else. So when it was a situation where a house was shot at, and his instincts took over, where he, just got the other person out of the line of fire. And then we had our final group member who, in her situation, when she faced, a dog attacking her, she froze, right? And again, with all of us, we found that coming off of that, the experience, whether it is that we froze, whether it is that we freaked out and almost took someone else down with us, or we let instinct take over and we protected someone else. After that, the adrenaline was still there, the heartbeats, and also, like, in my experience, and I don't know how this comes into all this, I have never been in the ocean since, right? And neither, my children are not allowed in the ocean. So that experience has sort of impacted me years later. So I don't know how that particular aspect would factor into our discussion, but I'd be interested to know. And FYI, for the previous group, I had two pet snakes growing up. So they could be
Yes, you
quite cute.
bring up such a great point, and we'll get into this more as we get deeper into the course. But remember what we were talking about, we've got our filing cabinets in our brains, right? Our brains store information. So you had this experience with the ocean, so the brain then stores that information in your filing cabinet. So now when approaching the ocean, your reference point is drowning. Makes sense, right? That's where our phobias come from. That's where phobias come from. It's just how our brain categorizes this information and we respond to it based on what we have stored there. Super, super common response. Good. Yeah, great examples. Great examples. Glad you're all okay. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Go ahead.
For our group, two of us had like witnessed car crashes. One was me, where there was a car crash in front of me and my sister, and my reaction was to like run away. And then my sister's was she went in shock and like stood still. So like we both had like different like reactions to it happening at the moment. And then after it all calmed down, we were both just like, she was just processing it, and I was just like calming down and be like, oh my god, what happened? Another one was another group member. They saw a car crash in the rear view mirror, and the car flipped over, and then they had their adrenaline rushing. They calmed down, they pulled off to the side, and then they went back, then checked on the people. We also had something on the 4th of July where the firework tipped over, and it almost like it aimed toward them on accident, went into the house. Their instinct was to flight, which was to get out of the way, and then after to calm down, and they're like, oh, we're not gonna keep doing fireworks. Another one was they had them and their cousins go uh, sell chocolates, and then dogs were like wanting to attack them. One cousin decided to try to like fight them off while the others ran away, and then they had to calm down after. And then I think that's it.
I love how, like in your example, there's these different responses that everyone's having, right? That's super important because a lot of times when you talk to people and they've had some experience, right? A lot of times the response is, well, why didn't you just do this? Why didn't those people just do X, Y, and Z, right? But remember, our bodies they're just going to respond. And we go into our autonomic response and we just do stuff. And sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. But this is the reason why we have things like fire drills and we have, our earthquake drills and all of this. It's to give us a reference point in our filing cabinet. So when something happens, we go, I know what to do here. Is it perfect? No, it's never going to be, but it helps. It helps with being able to guide people. Yeah, it's an involuntary reaction. I hear this a lot when there's like some natural disaster or some like active shooter situation or something happens that's big news. And the people who weren't there will say things like, well, why didn't they just do this thing? Or why didn't they just do that thing? They're not there. They're not in the fight or flight response. When you're in it and you're in that, you're having that experience and your body is responding to it, you're going to do things completely differently from somebody who's sitting there on their couch in safety, thinking about how they would respond to it after the fact, right? It's never going to align. It's apples to oranges. But people do that all the time. But this is why it would never quite make sense. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah. So with our group, we all had similar run-ins with animals on hikes.
Mhm.
So but yeah, we also had one member. She was drugged at a bar, and luckily enough, she was able to sense that something was wrong right away.
Mhm.
Felt weird, tasted weird, and the bar luckily had a tester, and she went to the bartender and where what it was, and it ended up being drugs. So, but yeah, she was able to get away from the situation. So that was a good thing.
Yeah. Aye. Well, I'm glad the bar had a tester and she was able to
Yeah.
be safe. Yeah, that is definitely terrible. Aye. Be careful out there, people.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Anyone else?
Hi. So I would like to say that my group, I'm sorry, I have kids in the back, but
No worries.
my group, we talked about the same run-ins with like animals. One person had like a run-in with a bear, so that was kind of like the situation the story that we heard. And then I had a situation with a coyote. I was taking my kids in to daycare, and the coyote was just running down the street, and I'm like, we're in like the city and stuff, and I'm like, where did this thing come from? So we were kind of scared, and then we all like all of our situations, we all retreated back into the house and stuff. That's what they did. So that's what I did. I went into the daycare, so I ran in there. So I was shocked at first because I'm like, what do I do? But and I was kind of like frozen for 1 second. I'm like, oh my gosh, me and my kids were out of the car and we're like the distance from the daycare. So I ran in there and like it was kind of a scary moment. And then I was also telling them about how some of us in the world, some people have like traumatic experiences and they live their daily lives in fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's hard to get out of that because they're always in defense mode. So some people can't just relax and just chill. It's always like they're just always in survival mode. And there needs to be like some type of therapy to be able to get them out of that mode. So that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. And this is what we were talking about, right? It goes back to our mental health is being connected to our body. It's not enough to just tell somebody to relax, which is what people hear all the time. Like, just relax. It's fine. It's not as simple as that. Our body is having a physiological response that is part of our autonomic division. So we don't get to just say relax. It doesn't work that way. So keep all these things in mind as you go throughout your lives, and we'll come back to this throughout the course. But we'll end there for tonight because we're out of time, and I'll see you all next week. Take care. Oh my gosh, Christian, I just seen your message. I almost got hopped in your car. That's, yeah, scary. Oh, mom is out there. No, yeah, labor triggers fight or flight. Absolutely. Good night, everyone. See you next week.